I think there's been a delightful update when it comes to ICP, and the reason why I think so is because the Internet Computer Today recently made a post, or should I say a statement, indicating how ICP is officially testing sovereign tamper-proof compute over Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, and as well as Azure. Now, nothing I say is financial advice. However, those three names I mentioned before, they're absolutely massive. However, let's take a look at a little bit more of the details when it comes to this, because allegedly the first pilots are already live on the NNS. NNS, by the way, stands for Network Nervous System. But even besides that point, this post indicates how by running cloud engines across Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, and as well as Azure, ICP kind of, in a way, right, infuses some of its good aspects into proven hardware. Now, if we take a look at, for instance, ICP, it's kind of known for decentralization and all that. So if it can kind of infuse, again, an aspect of that, but then into proven hardware that we already know, like, again, the names I mentioned before, we already know about how their hardware is very robust, it's very well known, the adoption is already fantastic, so we already kind of know that track record over there, right? However, we kind of loop that in with ICP, which, granted, I think is revolutionary, but doesn't have the proven track record of those other entities I mentioned before. I think ICP just as a project, kind of seeing this go on, I think is such a major milestone. This is my point of view, because other projects out there, they're slowing down. They don't care anymore, in my opinion, at least from what I can see. But I just don't see that when it comes to this. I feel like there's still activity, and as long as there's still activity, yet the charts are down, I see no reason for me to give up if I'm still a fan of the project, which I am. However, if we take a look at it as well, ICP, people like to say, they're not making good strides. Well, I would actually consider this right here to be a good stride. This is on top of, right, the stuff that we're seeing when it comes to Dfinity and what they're trying to do with Caffeine AI. Furthermore, we already know about the aspect of decentralized AI when it comes to ICP. So yeah, sure, ICP probably doesn't have the most popularity of all time, but for what it is, it seems very impressive, in my opinion. Keep in mind, ICP is ranked 51st in the world as of right now in terms of market cap. If we take a look at other projects that are kind of in the same ranking of ICP, sure, I mean, we take a look at something, for instance, in the case of Quant, Render, Cosmos, Algorand, which they're a little bit smaller than ICP, but nonetheless, they're kind of more or less kind of looped in to the same category sometimes in terms of size. But if we take a look at those other projects right there, sure, they're doing things, but if I take a look at the frequency in which ICP is having more news and more updates regarding it, it just seems a lot more dynamic than some of the other projects I mentioned before. Don't get me wrong, I'm still, for instance, a fan when it comes to Quant, for something like Render, something like Cosmos. I'm still a fan, but if I take a look at the frequency of the updates and the news that comes out when it comes to ICP, it just feels a little bit more frequent, which some people like to say, oh, who cares about that? Well, I think that matters a lot. For instance, in the case of the community, because some people out there, they do want to see the project that they're a fan of still have updates and news. So I think that box is ticked, right? Furthermore, when I take a look at just overall in terms of the perception of the project, it's sometimes not a good look, especially at a time like when the market isn't doing the best and then they don't really update that much. Again, I think sometimes that isn't necessarily the best look out there, because I think that kind of indicates indirectly in some cases that the team maybe is feeling the pressure a little bit, which of course at a time like this, the market isn't doing the best. A lot of teams are probably feeling a little bit of pressure. However, sometimes playing into that, it just doesn't make sense to me, because the team, they understand, in my opinion, that the market is probably going to have fluctuations, right? I think they also understand that this space overall is not just necessarily smooth sailing. I mean, the nature of this space, it's a lot more intense, the movements, when compared to some other markets out there. Sure, sometimes the upwards movements could be a little bit interesting to see. It could sometimes be considered very legendary, but sometimes the downwards movements are also pretty legendary. So at the same time, it's not a quote-unquote perfect market, because it isn't. Sure, sometimes it could do pretty okay, but when it has a pullback, it's usually very intense. And I think some of the teams out there know that. So if they already know this, and yet at a time when the market isn't doing the best, they're just giving off a vibe of giving up, it just doesn't make sense to me, because they would know that, right? They should already know that. So why are they suddenly so surprised that it's happening? It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, for instance, some other projects out there, they announced that they're basically shutting down in terms of the team. The token's still around, but the team has just basically stopped operations. But sometimes, even though I get it, the market isn't doing the best, but how could they not think about that previously in the past? They already know this space. So why keep a massive overhead? Why not at least trim it down a little bit so they could make it through moments like this? I don't know. It's very questionable why they do that sometimes. But I just don't see it here when it comes to Dfinity. Dfinity, it still seems like they're doing their thing, still seems like they're thriving. So when I take a look at that right there, I feel like just straight off the bat, it seems like the team is handling this market condition a little bit better than some other projects out there that don't really update much, and also in some cases that have stopped operations, which is unfortunate, of course, but at the same time, I just don't see it here when it comes to Dfinity, and I still like ICP, at least in my perspective. Now, of course, ICP is not quote-unquote perfect. I don't think there is anything such as a perfect project, but at the same time, ICP, given that kind of ranking around 50th in the world, again, more specifically, it's the 51st, it's just in that sweet spot for me, where it's not too massive, but it's not too small either, because if a project is too small, it's a little bit unproven. We don't really know how the community is going to hold up at a time like when the market isn't doing the best, and also how it's really going to play in the long term. Now, there's no way for me to know that as well when it comes to the case of ICP, but just because it's not that small, again, it's a little bit more kind of robust in terms of the community, in terms of the presence, but it's not too massive either, to the point where if the market hypothetically does recover, sometimes the projects that are so massive, the movement is a little bit boring in some cases. So again, I just kind of like ICP, where it's not too massive, but it's not too small either. However, when I take a look at it as well, people like to tell me, well, ICP is still below $2.50. Who cares about updates like ICP officially testing sovereign tamper-proof compute over Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, and as well as Azure? They like to say that sometimes, but to me, ICP is not the only one having a pullback. Other projects are as well, generally speaking. And if I take a look at that right there, if the common denominator is that a bunch of projects are having a pullback, I have to focus on the intangibles, in a sense where I have to focus on, is the project still doing things? Is there still activity? Because if the general consensus is that a lot of projects are not doing the best, if that is the condition, then I have to consider, okay, given those parameters, what is still thriving? What is still trying to do things, basically? And personally, in my case, I still do see that when it comes to ICP, despite this price pullback. So yes, we're over 4 times lower than $10 as of right now, and we even saw $10 last year. But even besides that point, I just can't use, oh, the price charts being low as an excuse for me to kind of not care because a bunch of projects are having a pullback. If it's only ICP, then okay, it's a different case. But if a bunch of projects are having a pullback, of course, I'm going to be focusing on the fundamentals. And so far, I like what I'm seeing. Now, granted, though, ICP, it could have any partnership it wants. It could have good news happen to it individually. It could do all that. Like in a random hypothetical, imagine if Dfinity announced the partnership with Justin Bieber for whatever reason. If that is even the case, I don't think it would do much to the charts of ICP. The reason why is because the market isn't doing the best. ICP can't just randomly go on an independent rally of its own, in my opinion, especially right now, if the sentiment doesn't change. So even if a Justin Bieber partnership won't really do much to the charts, let alone any other partnership or any other announcement or update when it comes to ICP that comes out. So when people like to say, but the charts aren't moving, well, yeah, because the sentiment overall isn't changing. ICP can't really do much if the sentiment overall isn't changing. So at a time like right now, yes, the charts are low, but That could be said for a bunch of other projects. I'm focusing on the fundamentals because I'm thinking more so about the long term. But that is why I still haven't given up. But I thought that was a really cool update that I saw recently, so of course, naturally, I wanted to make a video on it. However, I'll be sure to make more in the future when it comes to updates, so hopefully y'all stay tuned for that. It's been Lee the Captain. I'm out. Peace. Bye.